there's typically three responses that I would tend to get. There'll be some of you who will say, well, isn't that interesting? You'll be like, that's some interesting information. You'll go off and think about it maybe. Some of you are going to suggest that I buy stock in tinfoil because you're going to think I'm completely insane, out of my mind, totally crazy. Then there's going to be a third group that's going to search and see if these things be true. It's my hope that you guys will fall into that third category, although I wouldn't be surprised if many of you fall into the second category. Either way, I'm going to suggest that you do not believe a thing I say. I'm going to share with you some information that I have come to believe, and I'm just going to present it for your consideration. Fair enough? In the scriptures, it says that we are to prove or test all things and hold fast that which is good. Can we agree on this? All scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness. For the prophecy came not in old time by the will of man, but holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost. Thus, the scriptures in the Bible were inspired by the Holy Spirit and written by men. You agree with that? We're told to investigate before condemning information. King Solomon said, he that answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame unto him. Aristotle said, it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And an individual named Herbert Spencer said, there is a principle that is a bar against all information, which is a proof against all argument, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is condemnation before investigation. Reserve your judgment until the end of the presentation, because as we go along, you're probably going to be challenged on a few things, and you're going to be thinking this dude's crazy. You may still think that at the end of the presentation, but at least hear the whole matter before answering it. How many of you know what cognitive dissonance is? I just go ahead and say, you know what? It's like when you say something to somebody, let's say you have something that you know is true. You have no doubt that whatever it is true. And then somebody comes along and challenges that belief. And then all of a sudden you find yourself getting in touch with your inner psycho. You start getting very angry at the other person who presented that information. That may happen in the course of this presentation. You guys may start to experience some level of cognitive dissonance. Please don't hate me for it. Of course, as soon as you start talking about this circular, enclosed, flat earth cosmology, everybody thinks you're crazy, you're stupid, you're insane. This is the 21st century. Why are we even having this discussion? This is ridiculous. You're making Christians look stupid. I thought, well, Christians have no problem making themselves look stupid. we do a lot of things to make ourselves look stupid.
Don't even get me started on the craziness believed by the largely atheistic so-called science community, who believe they evolved from goo to you by way of the zoo out of a slime pit 4 billion years ago, which itself was the result of a microscopic dot that exploded and created everything we see in this ever-expanding universe. Yeah, now that's crazy.
And that is evolution. Because I taught evolution, I still am required to teach it as if it has been proven fact, not allowed to question it, and I saw all sorts of different proofs growing up, and they really shaped my mind. Not that I believed any of them after I, found truth, but these things, you've probably seen them, like these pictures of these embryos, and they were drawn over 100 years ago, and were admitted to be a hoax over 100 years ago. And they're still in textbooks today, and they show how similar we are to other organisms at early stages, because after all, we're all part of one big family tree, they say. But it's hoaxes like this that got my wheels turning as to what else are they lying about. And so I saw the evidence and the proof that it was a huge lie myself, because you can actually look at real pictures of these things now and realize they're not similar, but they're still on tests today. Okay, I've administered these tests. They're still on them. But then you have people like, look at the Java man here. Look at the hair on this guy. They put the hair of a black man and the skin color of a black man because these were white, Freemason, racist individuals wanting to make it look like black men were more related to these 8-man links than white people. Very racist. So I really find it hard to believe that there's so many people that are buying into this crap. But, to each their own. You can believe it. I'm not saying you're dumb for believing it. We've seen lots of evidence of it. But most of this evidence, like the Piltdown Man, was a Hollywood prop. It was a painted bone fragment with the teeth filed down to look more human-like. I mean, it's very, very sad, some of the things and the links they've gone to to fool people for generations. The Piltdown Man was 40 years in a museum, you know, and here's the Nebraska Man, beautiful specimen of a man that was made from the tooth of a pig. That's all they had, and they made this Nebraska Man, and it was front page news, and everybody was impressed and oohing and awing. And then you had the Neanderthal, who all these paintings, you know, look at these bone structures. It was old people with rickets and different bone structures, but they're basically human DNA. They're no different than you and I, other than some abnormalities with rickets. And then you have the dino bird here, and this is still looked at as one of the links between dinosaurs and birds, because, you know, scales turn into feathers. That's just how it works with mutations. But it was a hoax, and admitted to be a hoax, and National Geographic's admitted that they were sorry for doing that. And then you have this fish here, the coelacanth, that I saw calligrams and many good pictures about, and it was a fish that learned to walk on land and eventually grew feet, arms and legs and all that. Sadly, they still exist.
Since the Middle Ages, scientists have developed sophisticated new theories about the enormity of the universe and our place in it. Theories that often have no room for God.
Many phenomena have appeared mysterious or miraculous or magical. And then through the process of science, we've eventually understood them. Scientists gradually realized that the sun really is just one star among a multitude of stars in a gigantic galaxy having hundreds of billions of such stars. And all this was created in a Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago.
But while scientific theories, observations, and experiments tell us where we are in the cosmos, they don't answer the eternal questions: why we're here, and who, if anyone, created us.
It sounds very laudable to teach the controversy, to teach both theories, but there aren't two theories. There's only one theory around. There's only one game in town as far as serious science is concerned. Of course, you get negative reactions from creationists, but who cares about creationists? They don't know anything.
The amazing thing is that every atom in your body came from a star that exploded. And the atoms in your left hand probably came from a different star than your right hand. It really is the most poetic thing I know about physics. You are all stardust. You couldn't be here if stars hadn't exploded, because the elements, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, iron, all the things that matter for evolution weren't created at the beginning of time. They're created in the nuclear furnaces of stars, and the only way they can get into your body is if the stars were kind enough to explode. So forget Jesus. The stars died so that you could be here today. Okay? And anyway.
We're Johnny-come-latelys. We live in the cosmic boondocks. We emerged from microbes and muck. Apes are our cousins.
You don't believe that the Earth is round only if you're an astronaut. You don't believe Napoleon existed only if you're a historian. You believe these things because they're facts proved by evidence. Evolution is also a demonstrated fact. The truth really is out there. It's not a matter of opinion.
How many of you have heard that, according to the theory of evolution, we share about 98% of our genetic makeup with chimpanzees? Have you heard that in school? Have you ever heard how they came to that number? 98%? We've all just heard it, right? We share 98% of our genome with chimps. Okay, the video I'm about to show you is not from a Kent Hovind or a creationist. It's from somebody who believes in evolution, somebody who believes we came from chimpanzees, but actually acknowledging how we got the 98%. Check this out.
When researchers sat down to compare the chimp and human genomes, those single-letter differences were easy to tally, but the big mismatch sections weren't. For example, if a genetic paragraph, thousands of letters long, appears twice in a human scroll, but only once in its chimp counterpart, should that second human copy count as thousands of changes, or just one? And what about identical paragraphs that appear in both genomes, but in different places, or in reverse order, or broken up into pieces? Rather than monkey around with these difficult questions, the researchers simply excluded all the large mismatch sections, a whopping 1.3 billion letters in all, and performed a letter-by-letter comparison on the remaining 2.4 billion, which turned out to be 98.77% identical. So, yes, we share 99% of our DNA with chimps if we ignore 18% of their genome and 25% of ours.
oh yeah, if we just, 1 point whatever 4 billion letters, let's throw those out. Hey, we're 98% the same. What?
That's not shady at all. You're just going to exclude this chunk here that we've cut out and this chunk here and do some math and then realize that really these evolutionists, or at least 3 out of 1 of them, are bad at fractions. That's horrible. But why all the fraud, you say? Why lie about this? Because we do not need to know how loved we are. We're not allowed to talk about creation or how special we are. And you can't convince little people of this if you don't teach it to them at an early age. Okay? But then I started looking at the math of the cells, the statistics here. Okay? Each cell has about 1 billion phospholipids. These phospholipids are only made in the cells. Okay? And what are the chances of 1 billion of these, 3.8 billion years ago, just existing on their own, finding DNA and wrapping around it to make a cell? Self-replicating DNA. There's no chance of that. Okay? DNA is very intricate. We have animations now that show us how awesome creation is, that there is intelligent design behind this. There's a book that actually has evidence that it's accurate, that's been found and preserved in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that talked about creation, and it talked about an ark, Noah's Ark. And it sounds funny, it sounds comical, they make it seem like such a joke, but the ark was found and verified and is a national park in Turkey. I didn't know this. Okay, this thing has hardly any visitors. It's still there. You can go see it. The measurements are 100% accurate. There are metals used in this thing that we didn't even know mankind had access to back then. And it's a giant megastructure. It is phenomenal. Okay, it's found. We'll leave a link in the description so you can explore this yourself. If you've never heard of it, quite impressive. Okay, and it's still there. You can go visit this thing. Okay, it's still there for now. And there's also evidence of the parting of the Red Sea, and this happened in the book of Exodus. This is where God parted the sea for Moses and the slaves in Egypt who were set free, and they walked right through. And then Pharaoh's people tried to come after them. The chariots were destroyed. It's a really cool movie. If you ever get to watch the old movie, they did a great job back then. But these chariot wheels are still down there, and some of them quite well preserved. The ones that were made out of gold, you can still see the gold on them. It's shiny. There's bone fragments, horse hoofs, lots of different things that have no right being there, unless, of course, these chariots were at the bottom of the ocean when this thing collapsed around them. Okay? Wasn't like they were on top of a frozen sea. Okay, this is salt water here, and it's not a part of the world where it freezes. But you look at this, they're still there. These people found them. Some people were trying to debunk this, and they found evidence that defied their belief. Okay, so here's these wheels. Very nice, very, very symmetrical, and they're still there. I would love to go diving down there and find some of these things. But you're never going to see it on front page news, even though it is groundbreaking discoveries. Okay, and the book that these vents are in, they prophesied about a Messiah, and the rulers of this world knew he was coming. They killed many firstborn children to stop him, but he was born by the grace of God, and he fulfilled these prophecies. And this is one of the biggest things they're doing right now, is trying to erase his existence, pretend that he was a hoax, so that you will not find salvation in the grace and love that is there for you, and you will not burn forever if you reject this love. You can perish. That's the other alternative. Okay? The eternal beings that are causing such mischief, they'll burn forever. We're not. You and I are not eternal unless we have salvation. And evolution is just one of those small little lies, like the shape of our earth, that stops us from finding truth. Okay? Lots of different things. You can find it. We're going to take you on a journey. Of course, hopefully you can see now that there are things hidden from you that you weren't aware of. And it kind of made me angry. And it's put me on a mission to really point you people and brothers and sisters in the right direction. Okay? That's why I started another channel in the first place. This is actually a second channel that I had to start once I got in trouble for bad-mouthing these fake evidence and NASA and other organizations, and scientifically valid organizations like NASA. And so I'm not allowed to question that. So I was told to remove my face from that. So that's why you won't see my face on this channel for now. If I have a new job or something changes, you might. But it's not about me. It's not about us. And we're about to show you why they lie about the shape of our Earth in just this next little segment.
60 years ago, when the Russians beat us into space, we didn't deny Sputnik was up there. We didn't argue about the science or shrink our research and development budget. We built a space program almost overnight, and 12 years later, we were walking on the moon.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
What? It was a sound stage in New Mexico. That never happened. Let each man say what he deems truth, and let truth itself be commended unto God.
God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together in one place." The dry land appeared. It was so. And God called the dry land what? Earth, earth, earth. Now go to verse 14. God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs, seasons, for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light to the earth." And it was so, and God made two great lights. All right, what are these lights? The what? Sun and the moon. Did you just read in your Bible that the earth is older than the sun? Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You just read in your Bible that the earth was here before the sun. Right? You certainly did. Now, that's a big deal. Now, here's what you get into. There's two big words I want to throw out here to you. That's what I'm giving to you. And I want you to think about it. Geocentric and heliocentric. Here's what it means. Geocentric means that the earth is the center of the universe. Heliocentric means that the sun is the center of the universe. With a geocentric view, the sun and everything revolves around the earth, and the earth is fixed where it is. Now, here's the thing. My little excursion into this has revealed that most of the people that believe in a geocentric view of the earth also believe that the earth is flat. I'm going to throw some things out there for you this morning. If what you believe is real, and you really believe it, and you have a foundation for that belief, you should be able to defend it. I have no respect for somebody who says, "Well, I believe this and that," and you don't have anything to back it up. I'm not saying I believe in a flat earth. No. But there are some interesting points they make. Let me give you one. How many understand if the earth is a ball out here in space, then it has a curvature to it, right? You're going to see a curvature. Now, what's going to be more apparent is the higher you get, the more you're going to be able to see the curvature, right? In other words, you have to get to a point in space where you're able to look down on the earth and see the curvature of the earth, and therefore prove without a doubt that the earth is round. Now, did you know that in Lake Michigan, Chicago, Illinois sits on the western bank of Lake Michigan? How many of y'all know that? It's a good-sized town. At one time, Chicago was the second largest town in America. Chicago, Illinois. You can go 40 miles across the peninsular part of Michigan, and you can get out there on a boat 40-something miles away from Chicago and look across Lake Michigan, and you can see the skyline of Chicago, Illinois.
Here is a mirage.
And he was explaining to them how that the light was coming up and bouncing back down, and it was a mirage. You weren't really seeing Chicago by looking straight at it. You were seeing a reflection of Chicago. through the clouds and the atmosphere and whatever else is up there. So these guys up there, they got in this boat. And you've always got somebody like this. They hooked up their cameras, and they got in their boat, and they hooked up their cameras, and they focused in on Chicago, and you could barely see it. Barely, because of the haze in the distance. But they kept their cameras trained on Chicago, Illinois, and they began to cross Lake Michigan. And do you know something? Nothing ever changed except Chicago got clearer. Now, if you're following me in all of this, here's the point. If the earth is curved, they should not have been able to see Chicago 40 miles away. Is that right? I'm not saying I believe it, but it makes me think. How did they see Chicago? Airline pilots, when they go up, flight level, let's say 30, 35, in other words, 30,000 or 35,000 feet in the air. Let's say they're up there at 35,000 feet. As they rise in that aircraft, did you know what amazing thing happens? The horizon rises. Now, if the horizon was curved, would it rise or would it fall? So you believe in the flat earth? No, but I'm believing, listen to what they got to say. Their point is that God made the earth and he made everything else as it relates to the earth. And the earth is the center of God's plan for man. And that it is here the issue of sin and salvation is settled. And that because of that, the earth is primary and is of primary importance in God's creation. In plain words, you're not going to find anything out there that is nearly as important as what you've got going on here. Now, as far as that's concerned, I go with them 100%.
Could not be flat. There could be 12 continents. How would you know?
That's a matter of how we draw it up. But I feel like with the world, with the earth, when you stand back and you look at the horizon, you can see curvature. You can actually see it, unlike a dinosaur or something.
Yeah, or if you fly in one direction, you'll come back around, which in a flat world probably would not happen.
That is true. That is true. But these guys don't go around. They go to Cleveland, and then they go to...
With me now, Bill Nye, CEO of the Planetary Society, and of course, the science guy. Good to have you, Bill.
Good to see you, Craig.
Todd Aiken says believing in evolution requires faith. Paul Brown says it's a lie from the pit of hell. It lies straight from the pit of hell. What goes through your mind when you hear things like that?
Well, first of all, I, as a science educator, have failed. I failed.
No.
Evolution was discovered. It's not something people made up. It was discovered, and the evidence for it is astonishing. It's overwhelming.
How do we know the Earth is not flat?
We don't. It's flat.
Okay. Glad we established that.
No, here it is. Here it is. To realize that the Earth is not flat and that it's round means you're not in the center of the Earth. Some of the earliest civilizations we have records of were in the Middle East, okay? And that whole area is called the Mediterranean. Well, Mediterranean translates to Middle Earth. The people who lived there were sure they were in the middle of the Earth. That can only be true if you think Earth is flat. Well, we have many lines of evidence to show that Earth is round, including Apollo photos of the round Earth.
The only reason I reference that, of course, is you got into kind of a battle on Twitter about that a while back, earlier this year.
Yeah, it wasn't a fair battle when you know you're right and you know the other person's just completely regressed in their thinking. I only jumped in because there must have been an overlap in the Venn diagram of the followers that I have on Twitter and the followers that B.O.B. had on Twitter. And I don't know how big that overlap is, but it was sufficient for people to come to me and say, you know, B.O.B. is saying Earth is flat. You got to stop him. Say something. Save him from himself. And I'm saying, what? I'm looking, and there they were. And So, and I would have left it alone, because I don't have time for this, until I saw him saying, I use physics and math to show that Earth is flat. Now, those are fighting words. Okay? If he says he's invoking physics and math, let me see where he claimed to do so. I looked where he claimed to do so, and it was profoundly ignorant of formulas and physics related to the physics of establishing the size of the Earth. Now, I don't mind that people don't know things. That's just plain old ignorance. Ignorance shouldn't be thought of as a bad word. All right? Ignorant just simply means you don't know. But if you don't know and you have the power of influence over others, that's dangerous. If you don't know and you don't know that you don't know, that is particularly dangerous. And so I don't blame BOB, and I blame the educational system that can graduate someone into adulthood who cannot tell the difference between what is and is not true about this world.
Watch the trajectory of the space shuttle. It doesn't go straight up. It always goes in a curve and out to sea. The point is that they actually go horizontal. The space shuttle goes horizontal. It never goes any further up. It goes horizontal, very, very low down in the atmosphere, because it drops its external tank while it's still in the atmosphere. So, you know, it's still in the atmosphere while it's horizontal, so it never gets any higher, and it goes out of sight, not because it goes too high, because it goes too far downrange. And it seems that nobody's ever on the space shuttle, and the proof of that is the Challenger disaster. I believe it's 1986, the Challenger exploded just after takeoff and killed 7 astronauts. But it turns out that 6 of the astronauts are still alive, and most of them are using their original names. And you can find pictures of them. They're using the same names, and they're doing ordinary jobs now.
So where's the edge?
Who's to say that there is an edge, and why assume there is one? Is it because when we are introduced to the idea of a flat Earth, it's always depicted like this? In the currently most accepted model, Antarctica is not a continent, but a 360-degree landmass made up of ice that holds the oceans within. When we look at a Gleason's map from 1892 that states at the top that it's scientifically and practically correct, as is. We see this Antarctic ice rim. The Gleason's map is basically an azimuthal equidistant projection, which can be traced back to the year 1000. The oldest known globe in the world is from 1492. This is something you need to keep in mind because many people argue that the azimuthal equidistant map is just a flattened out version of the globe, when in fact the globe is just a rounded version of this true world flat map. If the flat map came first and it has the ability to convert into a globe without any problems whatsoever, then that should tell you a little bit about how this globe deception was achieved. Now, back to if there is an edge or not. There is no proof that there is an edge past the Antarctic ice wall, but it is speculated by many that perhaps the plane that we live on is either extremely expansive or it's possibly endless. In these two scenarios, it would be logically assumed that more land is being hidden from the general public. In a 1954 interview with Admiral Richard E. Byrd, an American naval officer who specialized in exploration, he had this to say.
But strangely enough, there is left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole, on the other side of the South Pole, from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
Implying that there is more land past Antarctica. If that uninhabited land was on a globe, it would be in the Indian Ocean. A recent discovery of an old Buddhist map in a newspaper from 1907 seems to support the idea of a vast plain with much more land.
Hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong and as a molten looking glass?
For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water.
When I look at the people who signed the Antarctic Treaty, this is what my latest work is a timeline that I'm putting together. And I actually start with the Tower of Babel, and I'm going all the way up to this September with CERN. That's the timeline that I'm covering. But really focusing in on the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and up to 72 during the Apollo program. You've got, people never really got to Antarctica until the 1800s because they just weren't able to do it. Late 1800s finally start finding ways to break through the ice, and this is interesting. James Cook, I think was his name. I believe it was in the 1700s, maybe 1700s or 1800s. 1773 on 30 January 1774, James Cook reaches 71 degrees 10 minutes south, farthest south, coming within 75 miles of the Antarctic mainland without seeing it. Okay. Later reports said that during 3 voyages lasting 3 years and 8 days, Captain Cook and crew sailed a total of 60,000 miles along the Antarctic coastline, never once finding an inlet or path through or beyond the massive glacial wall. So the other question is, well, how come ships don't go off the sea if it's flat? How come ships don't fall off the edge? Well, here's why you don't fall off the edge. There's a 200 to 300 foot high wall that is the coastline of Antarctica. It's the border that Scripture says is keeping everything in. Nothing's going past that. But yet the Earth is 25,000 miles in circumference, allegedly. It took him 60,000 miles to circumnavigate Antarctica. In the 1700s, this guy gets there. You get into the 1800s, they get closer and closer. And then when you get to the 1900s, that's where things get really interesting. Shackleton, this guy Shackleton goes down there. He goes down there on the name of the ship is the Nimrod. He goes down there on the Nimrod, and it's called the Nimrod Expedition. I'm like, seriously? Okay, Nimrod's goal was to reach into heaven, right? British Antarctic Expedition, otherwise known as the Nimrod Expedition. And it was on the name of the ship was the Nimrod right here. Okay, Nimrod was trying to reach into heaven by going up. Could it be that these guys are trying to go out, try to find the ground floor? I don't know, but I mean, why do you? And this is what really got me is they did so in 1908. 1908. I'm like, really? 1908? Seriously? 1908 is when Nimrod was born. The 350 post-flood years of Noah's life. This is a chart I did last year, and the follow-up chart, the Nimrod-Abraham timeline. Nimrod was born in 1908 AM, or years since creation. And then 1908, see, 1907 to 1909, well, that's 1908. Nimrod went to Antarctica. I'm like, I mean, wow. Okay, so they go down there. A whole bunch of people are, from that point on, once they start finding ways to get through the ice to get there, more and more expeditions and better ships are built and used to get there. Then you get to Admiral Byrd. Now, when Admiral Byrd goes down there several times, and one of the operations is called Operation High Jump. And you're like,
oh, geez.
Yeah, right. Operation High Jump. Operation High Jump. Really? Operation High Jump. I mean, because they went out there with aircraft carriers and airplanes and stuff. So then he gets on TV, national TV, and he does this radio show where he talks about all of the natural resources down there. I mean, coal and uranium and stuff to fuel the world forever. And all these nations are going down there, Russia and Japan, all these nations are going down there. Check it out. Well, then he goes down after that interview. They go down on the next mission, which I believe was called Operation Deep Freeze. And then all of a sudden everything changes. Everybody pulls out, they leave Antarctica, and all the nations that were down there doing whatever they were doing signed a treaty, the Antarctic Treaty, and I believe it was 1958 or somewhere thereabouts, saying, nope, nobody can stake a claim to Antarctica, and if you're going to go down there, you can only go down there for scientific reasons under carefully restricted guidance, but it's not a free-for-all. Nobody can just, you know, hey, I'm going to go check out Antarctica and do a high jump on my own. No, can't do it. Look at the nations that signed the Antarctic Treaty, and I look at the nations that are putting forward quote-unquote space videos of the Earth, they're the same people. So if I was to put on my tinfoil hat and play the conspiratorial role here, there definitely appears to be some very suspicious things that took place. And then all of a sudden NASA is formed, and then simultaneously you have Russia and the United States doing high altitude nuclear bomb testing. They're blowing up nuclear bombs high up in the atmosphere, and they called it Operation Fishbowl. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, man. I mean, they're calling it Operation Fishbowl. Okay, so I mean, right. So Admiral Byrd goes down there, Operation High Jump, 1946 through 47, and Operation Deep Freeze, 1955 through 56. Then he dies on March 11th, 1957. Then the Antarctic Treaty takes place shortly after his death. We see that the main treaty was opened for signature on December 1st, 1959, and officially entered into force on June 23rd, 1961. Meanwhile, NASA's formed in 1958. Then after Operation Deep Freeze and whatever weirdness took place down there, everybody leaves Antarctica. Something happened down there after Operation Deep Freeze. And right away, the United States and Russia start launching high-altitude nuclear bombs in the atmosphere. Now, I can see why the people will put on a conspiracy hat at this point, because if they're trying to avoid a conspiracy, they're not helping with the names. And then when you look at the high-altitude nuclear bomb tests that began, Dominic, was a series of 31 nuclear test explosions with a 38.1 megaton total yield conducted in 1962 by the United States in the Pacific. This test series was scheduled quickly in order to respond in kind to the Soviet resumption of testing after the tacit 1958-61 test moratorium. The Thor missile was also used to lift warheads into near space to conduct high-altitude nuclear explosion tests. These shots were collectively called Operation Fishbowl. Operation Dominic occurred during a period of high Cold War tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, since the Cuban Bay of Pigs invasion had occurred not long before. Now, check this out. If you click on Operation Fishbowl, early part of 1962, we're talking May. I mean, look at all these bombs going off. 25 April, 1962, 27 April, 2 May, 4 May, 6 May, 8 May, 9 May, 11 May, 11 May, 12 May, 14 May, 19, etc., etc., etc. This is all before President Kennedy's "Let's go out in the space" speech. But I think a lot of people don't realize that our first stop wasn't the moon. Even before we went to the moon, they were sending probes all of a sudden after all of this. Okay, keep the timeline in mind. And if you notice during President Kennedy's speech, he was talking about that they've already got probes headed to Venus. Wait a minute. We're already sending stuff to Venus and Mars? We haven't even been to the moon yet. As early as February 4th, 1961, they're sending a probe, Sputnik 7. Russia sent this probe to check out Venus. The final stage of the rocket carrying Sputnik 7 into orbit failed, and the spacecraft was unable to achieve the necessary trajectory to carry it onto Venus. Then Venera 1, Russia, sends out another probe February 12, 1961. They lost communications while it was on its way to Venus. Then NASA sends up Mariner 1, July 22nd, 1962. Now, that's right in the middle of Dominic and Fishbowl, that we sent out a probe to go check out Venus. It veered off course and was destroyed by ground controllers. So then Russia sends up another one, Sputnik 19, August 25th, 1962. The spacecraft made it into orbit, but the rocket's last stage failed as Sputnik 19 was unable to achieve its Venus trajectory and re-entered the Earth's atmosphere 3 days later. NASA, August 27th, 1962, sends its probe. It says Mariner 2 was the first spacecraft to successfully fly by Venus at an altitude of 34,773 kilometers. Okay, so this is during the time period that between August 27th, 1962 and December 14th, 1962 that we had President Kennedy's speech in September, on September 12th, 1962. So that's what he's referring to. You know, we've already got stuff out there. So it appears that whatever happened in Antarctica, everybody got kind of maybe nervous or excited or whatever and said, okay, what is the deal? You know, we've looked through telescopes. We've seen our so-called neighbors, Venus and Mars, through telescopes. Our assumption is the solar system is, you know, set up in the Copernican model. And, but yet maybe they found a dome and they started to question all that. So the first thing they do is send out probes to go, wait a minute, what in the world? If we're in a dome, how high does this thing go? So they start launching high altitude nuclear bombs. And if you look at the videos on Operation Fishbowl and Starfish Prime and all those high altitude tests, I mean, it looks like they're hitting something up there. I mean, at least from a conspiratorial tinfoil hat wearing perspective, that's what it looks like. Now, this is what blew my mind. I go to Lubbock, and I'm doing this conference out there at Jared Cressman's father's church, Pastor Dan Cressman, and we get to talking about this whole issue of the flat Earth stuff. And he goes, "Do you know what the name Dominic means?" And I said, "No." He says, "You know, you talk about Operation Fishbowl, but check this out. I'm going to take you to." I'll put the screen share back up here. Take you to a one of those name websites. I like using behindthename.com. Look up the name Dominic, and again, let's just double check it here. Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C. Look up Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C, from the late Latin name Dominicus, meaning of the Lord. Fishbowl was part of Operation Dominic. It looks like they are sending high altitude nuclear bombs to test the fishbowl of the Lord, i.e. the firmament. Yeah, this is definitely one of those things to make you go,
Where does the sun go if the Earth is flat?
Well, the sun neither rises nor sets, but travels in a clockwise circuit from east to west, and only appears to rise and set due to perspective. The sun disappears at the vanishing point of human perspective on the horizon where the ground meets the sky, and since the sun is not 93 million miles away, I repeat, not 93 million miles away, but much closer and smaller, the light emanating from the sun only illuminates about half of the flat plane at once as it makes its daily journey.
What's underneath the flat Earth?
This is obviously an unanswerable question since the assumed edge has never been known to be reached, but many people suppose that whether the Earth is round or flat, that either way, it still must be floating in the middle of outer space. But the idea of outer space goes out the window with the round Earth theory. Many religious texts support an immovable Earth that has its foundations on which it is laid and its pillars by which it is supported. We simply don't know, but we do know that the Earth is obviously fixed in place, as we can tell by our everyday experience of non-movement. What we see in the skies above are illuminated objects making circles around us just as it appears. Whatever this place may be, it's the center of all we survey. Some say that the Earth is the floor of the universe. In the ancient Hebrew conception of the universe, we are surrounded by the waters above and the waters below, known as the Great Deep. The deepest hole ever drilled into the Earth was a total of about 7.5 miles. The very core of the Earth is nothing more than wild speculation, if not another malicious lie. So what's under the Earth? That remains a mystery to us all. But another thing that you can research is what's inside the Earth. Multi-billion-dollar deep underground military bases known as DUMBs. A great question to ask yourself is, why can't we see noticeable curvature from 120,000 feet up? But many people claim that the supposed curvature can be seen from the ground by watching boats. It doesn't make sense.
What about satellites and GPS?
As crazy as it may sound, satellites are a hoax. Have you ever wondered why there are never any damaged or fallen satellites? And why there are no satellite malfunctions due to constant heating and cooling? It's weird they don't melt in the thermosphere that's over 2,000 degrees. I find myself looking at the moon and wondering why we never see satellites pass by the moon. Did you know there are thousands of miles of fiber optic cables under the seabed that supplies 90% of the Earth's communication, internet, phones, etc.? And GPS works off of cell phone towers. It's called triangulation. Haven't you seen those really tall towers and wondered what they are? Satellite TV is just enhanced radio using ground-based towers. It's all ground-based, just like the old TV antenna. Science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke proposed the idea of geostationary satellites in 1945 in a magazine called Wireless World. And 20 years later, in 1965, they claim to have successfully launched the first commercial geostationary communication satellite. Today, there are said to be thousands, but the odd thing is that trying to prove it only leaves you fruitless. Now, what we are told about outer space and what it is not true at all. Everything we believe about so-called outer space is due mostly to Hollywood movies and other media, including children's cartoons. Of course, NASA propaganda is the biggest culprit. As we have already gone over, there are no pictures of Earth, and even images of all the other so-called planets are computer-generated. NASA has gone on record numerous times stating that humans can't get past low Earth orbit.
And unlike the previous program, we are setting a course with specific and achievable milestones. Early in the next decade, a set of crewed flights will test and prove the systems required for exploration beyond low Earth orbit.
Low Earth orbit is supposedly between 99 and 1,200 miles away. The funny thing is that they say the moon is over 200,000 miles away. How did we make it so far in the 1960s and 70s if we can't do it today? Also, the International Space Station, just like everything else brought to us by NASA, is a fake Freemasonic hoax, completely fabricated and done with special effects, models, pools, zero-G planes, and various other camera tricks. Very easily, you can travel east and west directions to ultimately end up right back where you started. The face of the Earth looks similar to that of a clock. In fact, clocks were most likely designed after the true appearance of our world. If you follow a compass east for long enough, you'll make a full circuit. Same thing if you travel west long enough. As we've already gone over, the flat Earth map that was around before globes were easily converts to a globe, so everything you believe you are doing on a globe is actually taking place on a flat Earth.
How come the moon is upside down in the southern hemisphere?
This is another very simple explanation. When somebody is in the northern part of the Earth, or on the northern part of the Earth, they see the moon from this angle. When somebody is on the southern part of the Earth, the moon looks like this. They're looking at it from this angle. They see it from the opposite angle, and that's all it is. Imagine you tape a picture of the moon in the center of your living room, right? Depending on where you are in the room, the moon will be seen differently. When pondering this question, keep in mind that the face of the moon never changes. On a spherical Earth, we'd expect to see other sides, but we never have.
What about the seasons?
The sun is close and small, and it circles around and above the flat Earth in a spiral pattern on the Tropic of Cancer in the northern summer months, and then down in the Tropic of Capricorn in the northern winter months. So when the sun is further away from the North Pole, right, the center of the flat Earth, it's winter in the north and summer in the south. Since the sun is smaller than we are told and closer, it makes much more sense that we experience seasons in the first place. If the sun was 93 million miles away and had a radius of over 400,000 miles, we would hardly experience temperature fluctuation as we do.
What about gravity?
Gravity is necessary in order for a spinning ball Earth to work. People readily believe that you can't fall off of a spinning ball that's darting through outer space at speeds that you can't even comprehend, yet they will deny how much easier it is to stay on a flat surface that doesn't move. Gravity is a scapegoat for all that cannot be explained, and it has never been proven. The reason why things fall or float is because of density and buoyancy. If something is heavier than air, it falls. If it's lighter than air, it floats. Very straightforward. Your phone is denser than the air, therefore it falls when you drop it. Everything works because of density. No need to factor in imaginary components. Quote, "The law of gravitation is said by the advocates of the Newtonian system of astronomy to be the greatest discovery of science, and the foundation of the whole of modern astronomy. If, therefore, it can be shown that gravitation is a pure assumption, and an imagination of the mind only, that it has no existence outside of the brains of its expounders and advocates, the whole of the hypotheses of this modern so-called science fall to the ground as flat as the surface of the ocean. And this most exact of all sciences, this wonderful feat of the intellect, becomes at once the most ridiculous superstition and the most gigantic imposture to which ignorance and credulity could ever be exposed." Thomas Winship, Zetetic Cosmogony.
What about the Coriolis effect?
They say that the Coriolis effect is a result of the Earth spinning and is responsible for the deflection of an object moving above the Earth, rightward in the northern hemisphere and leftward in the southern hemisphere. The problem is that things like hurricanes and water in the sink aren't always predictable and have been known to spin both ways in either hemisphere. Also, another contradiction that proves the Coriolis effect false is the fact that no flying machine above the Earth has to account for it. If a bullet that travels 1,700 miles per hour has to account for the effect, then an airplane traveling at 550 miles per hour would definitely have to account for the effect. When you look for the answer, you'll find that we are told that since the atmosphere moves with the spin of the Earth, planes aren't affected. So why would bullets be? Especially when they go much faster than common airplanes.
NASA isn't the only space agency. Are all others in on it too?
The answer is yes. Here's a short clip on what you need to know.
If you've ever looked at NASA's official logo, both their official insignia and their official seal, you'll see that the most prominent object in the seal is a red swooshing object. They call that the chevron or the vector. If you ask NASA's Public Affairs Office, this symbology is featured so heavily in their insignia and seal, they'll give you what really amounts to the standard facile cover story for the unilluminated. They'll tell you that that is a representation of a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s, which was the time the logo was created. Not exactly the case. Someone might want to ask the Russian Federal Space Agency, Roscosmos, that was formed in 1992, why they chose that same logo. And while you're at it, you can go ask the Chinese, who formed their space agency in 1996, why in the world they're using a hypersonic wing design from the 1950s as their official logo. Then you can ask the Japanese, the South Koreans, Taiwanese, Malaysia, Mexico, Iran, all of these countries, even Bulgaria. They all utilize the vector symbology in their space agency logos for their national space agencies. It gets even deeper. You can go look at the individual manned program patches for NASA. The Mercury program, for example, a blatant use of covert symbology. In every logo dealing with the Mercury program, you'll see what looks like a number 7 in their logo. And again, NASA's official story is that they put this number 7 there so that they could pay homage to the original 7 Mercury astronauts. Kind of forgetting the fact that only 6 Mercury astronauts actually flew into space, because number 7 never did. Deke Slayton had a heart problem, so he didn't get to go up. So there were only 6 Mercury astronauts, yet there's a 7 in every single logo. That's in the official mission or official program insignia for Mercury, as well as the 6 individual mission patches carry this logo. And it carries on to the Space Shuttle program. If you look at the Apollo logo has a big letter A in it. At least that's what they want you to believe, but it's not. Again, that's just a simple way of explaining away the inclusion of this vector symbology in the logo. If you go to the Space Shuttle program, the original Space Shuttle STS program patch is a triangular patch that, again, hides the use of the chevronic vector symbology. And that also goes for many of the STS-specific mission patches. Every single one of the International Space Station expedition patches carry the vector symbology. The Russian Mir space station used the vector symbology. That was their official logo. You can even go deeper and look at military-industrial complex companies. Look at the logo on a company like Lockheed Martin, 2 vectors. The X Prize logo, Ames Research Labs, U.S. Space Command. When you get into the military realm, the United States Space Command, their official logo is the vector symbol. And when you look at the military's individual space-specific programs, all of them deal with vector symbology in their official insignias. And the question really becomes, who or what are these people paying homage to?
Let's look at NASA's Earthrise. Now let's look at JAXA's Earthrise. Do you believe this is real? You will find that the Jesuits and the Vatican have been intimately involved in all things space, including owning the earliest telescopes and, to this day, the largest owners of observatories and telescopes in the world. The Society of Jesuits have been actively spreading the heliocentric theory for 500 years, while trying to bury thousands of years of flat Earth cosmology. The Jesuits are rulers of all powers that we are aware of, and have been ruthless in their pursuit of world domination for centuries, no matter who is killed or what has to be done to establish a one-world order out of chaos. They rule over, or are deeply partnered with, people like the Rothschilds and many other international banksters, secret societies, especially the Freemasons, as well as Zionist Jews, and especially Zionist Jews in seats of power. They rule over all the alphabet agencies and government think tanks, including the NSA, CIA, FBI, Mossad, KGB, Roundtable, Committee of 300, Tavistock Institute, Lucius Trust Publishing, Bilderberg Group, and the Council of Foreign Relations, including representative government and legislation like the U.S. Presidency, Congress, and the Supreme Court. Freemasons are also spread out all over the world to further the different agendas that serve this Illuminati elite.
Why the lie?
Their desire is to convince us that we are only one of a septillion other planets flying through infinite space. A septillion? Where do they get these numbers? A septillion has 24 zeros. They want us to think that we are nothing more than a cosmic accident caused by a big bang that took place 14 billion years ago. Again, where do they get these numbers? How one could draw that conclusion is unknown. They want us not to understand our origin and go on believing that life is meaningless. They want us to believe that alien life is real and that they created us. Look no further than Ancient Aliens for the propaganda. Not to mention countless shows and movies they program us with. It means that the origin of man is deliberately being covered up from us. Man, woman, child, you are being deceived on a massive scale. Flat Earth, enclosed flat Earth, expansive plane flat Earth, or even infinite plane flat Earth with an infinite ceiling barrier, or possibly another plane of existence above us and below us. It means that this place was created, that you were designed, you were crafted, you are special and with purpose. A purpose being hidden from you on purpose. We are supposed to know our world and our reason for being. We've been swallowed whole by this economic fiat money system that controls absolutely everything and fuels this manufactured reality. Most of us know that we are slaves, and it's no wonder we desire to escape through movies, TV shows, and video games that happen to also further our programming and mental conditioning. We were never meant to live like this, and knowledge of our flat Earth is a step in the right direction. It's something that can't be taken from us. It's the fuel that we need to let these bastards know that we won't go down in ignorance. We will not willingly accept their one world authority that wants to rule over all mind and all matter. Embrace this flat world of ours and free your mind from the globalist mind control. It's time that we stand up for ourselves and our beautiful Earth. All I want to know is, who's coming with me? Ever dreamed of going up to outer space, or maybe meeting other beings from another place? Have you ever wondered what it's like on other planets? Then you watch a science show and come to believe you understand it. You feel empowered by the knowledge and you feel enlightened, listening to Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson. But then you wake up and you start to see the obvious. Life is just a lie and this whole world ain't what we thought it was. NASA's missions to the moon were never completed. They just filmed them in a room and people believe it. I used to wonder what it's like to be an astronaut. Now when I see them acting, I can't help but to laugh a lot. They give us cartoons and they claim that we live on a ball, but it's flat and it's not moving or spinning at all. Why you lying to us, man? That's something that we want to know. After that, you're gonna have to pack up all your stuff and go. History has been rewritten by winners of wars. The Jesuit order, Khazars, Freemasons, and more. They pulled the veil over our eyes, and it's time to awaken. Through organized indoctrination, our minds have been taken. It's time we take our power back and we rescue our people. The Vatican and the bankers are like Resident Evil. They may have had the greatest plan that was ever concocted, but Illuminati never thought that they'd ever be spotted. They're manufacturing reality all in our heads. They tell us if the earth is flat then we'll fall off the edge, but if it is a spinning ball we won't fall off it then. And gravity is our imaginary magic friend. Why is water always flat when unmanipulated? Why are pictures of the earth computer generated? Why you lying to us, man? That's something that we want to know. After that you're gonna have to pack up all your stuff and go.
It's becoming 100% crystal clear that you and the other space programs that are in operation are connected and are deceiving the entire world. More and more people are waking up every single day, and we are now able to see right through you. But what we really want to know is, why are you lying? Sincerely, me and the great people of this earth.
Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement.
So we look at Pythagoras, we look at Eratosthenes, and even Aristotle, I suppose. You have to know that for 4,000 years prior, the worldwide understanding was a circular still flat earth set on pillars under a dome with some variance in the model, but basically that was what they all believed. So when these guys showed up, you know that they were the crazy ones the media was writing hit pieces about. Look at that globe dart over there. He thinks the earth's a ball. He thinks it's going around the sun. They were the crazy ones. You can imagine them in the Colosseum having a conference like this, trying to convince people. No, really, it's a ball. Now, to those of you who don't come from a biblical worldview, you're laughing at us, saying, that's ridiculous, that's stupid, that's insane, that's absurd. It doesn't matter which worldview you're coming from, it's absurd. Pick another mythology, creation myth. You got some really crazy stories in the other ancient texts as to how God or gods created the world. But in the secular world, you know, they do away with all that stuff and they come up with this microscopic dot that exploded 14 billion years ago. And somehow lava turned into life from goo to you by way of the zoo. You know, who am I? You saw my resume up there, right? I mean, I don't have any pictures, you know, showing me in a fancy robe with a square hat and a tassel hanging down. There's no letters after my name. There's no reason for you to listen to me. In fact, I would say don't listen to me. Don't believe a thing I say. Go out and look this stuff up for yourself. Or we could just let NASA speak for themselves, shall we? Let's listen to what they have to say.
Go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
We're also really pushing the boundaries in terms of where we're going forward with exploration. I think humans are naturally driven to do this, and this is really the beginning, I think, of human beings leaving low Earth orbit. I certainly plan on being around to see that.
Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. We only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Once we travel beyond low Earth orbit, the crew will be exposed to larger amounts of radiation. So we have to design both the crew protection systems and our electronic systems to withstand this radiation.
What? We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space? I thought this problem was solved over 40 years ago when he sent a bunch of people in jumpsuits and tin cans through it, there and back a half dozen times. Oh, but I forgot.
the Apollo guys, they were clueless regarding the radiation belt. That it didn't affect them.
I don't know the distance to the Van Allen radiation belt, and if we did, it wasn't a problem. If we were going to encounter it, then we would have had to build the spacecraft and the spacesuit to not give humans a problem. You don't just build something and hope it works. You study to see what the threats are, the environment is, and then you say, how thick do I have to make the metal on the spacecraft so that going through this kind of radiation or these kind of meteoroids, it won't get hurt. And so then we build it that way.
I help manage the Orion Crew and Service Module office. We're responsible for developing the crew capsule, which is where the crew lives and works when they're in space. We don't have the ultimate answer for radiation on Orion. We're still working on that. If we were to build Orion out of the materials we need and the sole job was to protect for the radiation environment, the vehicle would really be too heavy. So we have to balance the weight of the materials that we put on the spacecraft with how much protection it's providing the crew. So we're really looking at it from an operational perspective. If we understand a radiation event has happened, the crew will actually take shelter in the aft bay of the vehicle. We have found over the years that water is a really great radiation absorbing material. So we could do things like water that's already there in the water bags for drinking and things like that. That water could be used to shield them. As well as we had some concepts like a water-filled vest that they could put on should they know there's an event and need to be protected.
We don't have a clue when it comes to like how to protect them from like radiation, so we're gonna just like put them up there in like water suits. Yeah, we like water suits, and like we put water all around them, so the radiation could go like into the water, and then they could drink it, and it could be like a Fantastic Four. Everybody they'll come back and be mutants when they get back. But we just got some ideas, yeah. But don't worry about it. Yeah, I know there are refugees everywhere, and like people are starving and stuff, and like we have homeless all over the place. But if we spend like a few $1 trillion, I think we should be able to figure out how to make water suits for the astronauts in space, and then maybe it'll work out like it did for the guys in Apollo.
The belts are 1,000 miles to 25,000 miles above the Earth.
Then we went right out through them.
No effects on your cells?
We didn't even know it. I don't think anybody, well, maybe somebody said you went through the radiation belt, but we didn't feel it inside, and we didn't get any, added radiation.
Yeah, if you pretend that it's not really there, then you can just go right through it.
To protect the astronauts from the Van Allen radiation belts, the lunar module would have required 6 feet of lead shielding. But here's what they really had for protection.
Obviously, the only shielding they had was the literally paper-thin outer hull of aluminum, and their suits consisting of glass fiber, some aluminum fibers, and silicon rubber.
It's very interesting concerning radiation that the astronauts were protected by a thin film of aluminum, when here on Earth they put a lead shield on us when they take a dental x-ray.
In conclusion, when NASA themselves admit to never having left low Earth orbit, and the fact that we don't even have the materials that could withstand the extreme temperatures and cosmic rays in space, how on earth can anyone believe that we ever went to the moon?
Good question.
you almost had it. You gotta be quicker than that.
choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Already covered Elon Musk and his fraud called SpaceX. Nothing more than fakery. Let's take a look at the footage once again. Something I want to break down. No offense, but you got to be a complete moron if you believe this. Let's take a closer look at this. I mean, again, I talk about where are the stabilizers being used as this basically a pencil of a rocket's falling from space, from the sky, and there's nothing. I mean, it's a complete joke. I mean, you would expect some type of stabilizer at the very top of the rocket. You know, coming down at this speed, there's absolutely no thrust on either side. A lot of knuckleheads coming to my channel telling me, well, I seen the launch of SpaceX from the beach. I'm not disputing they launched this thing. The problem is this pencil coming in for a landing. That's what I'm disputing. With all the footage by SpaceX, all you have is this one vantage point. And again, you just see the rocket take off, but as you see in this diagram, as the first stage releases the second stage, there's supposedly a flip maneuver that takes place with the first stage before it comes in for its vertical landing. Now, getting back to these three clowns like I showed before, the Backstreet Boy Reject and these two, let's take a listen to what they say here.
You actually just saw the grid fins on the first stage pop out right there. We use those to dynamically steer the vehicle as it comes back down using air resistance as it passes through supersonic airstreams
these
to
things.
get it back towards the landing zone 1 at Cape Canaveral.
Take a look at this junk. Take a look at that garbage. That's going to stabilize this rocket for a landing. I mean, people will believe this, they'll believe anything. Now listen to what it said here.
So it looks like the clouds are just beginning to break there, making for a pretty picture-perfect landing. No video from the ground like we expected earlier, but...
No video from the ground like we expected earlier. Give me a break once again. So again, you only have this external footage provided by SpaceX. I mean, with all the money they have, with Elon Musk being a billionaire, $13.4 billion, and I guess it doesn't fit in the budget to have more camera angles, camera views. And with all the money he has, he could put cameras all around. But one thing I found interesting is this one SpaceX fanboy, just one out of all the millions, was able to obtain footage. This guy here, no doubt whatsoever, he's part of it. He's part of the payroll, just like these geeks you see here on the same payroll, no doubt whatsoever. Take a look at the footage that he has from his channel with his landing, so-called landing. This is it. Besides the one, again, SpaceX footage, you have this one as well. Nothing closer. Amazing. Out of all the millions of SpaceX fanboys and all the billions of dollars, again, that Elon Musk has accumulated through his businesses, and that's all you get. Nothing from CNN, nothing from Fox News, nothing from MSNBC. Johnny on the spot that gets this footage. And it doesn't pass a smell test. Nothing real about it. Nothing whatsoever. Take another look. Amazing. Just two pieces of footage of this landing. And again, talk about the mainstream media. Where are they at? A historic, once again, landing of this rocket. And CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, again, nowhere in sight. Rely on, again, Johnny on the spot. I talk about it many times. I'm not disputing they actually have a rocket launch. Okay, I'm going to speed this up. This rocket does nothing more than once again go straight into the ocean. I'm going to play it towards the very end. And you can see this rocket doing nothing more than crashing into the ocean. Like a pile of junk that it is. Again, nothing more than expensive firework. Now, I found this pretty interesting on Twitter with Elon Musk and his account when asked, is there any reason that most of the landings appear to have been at night so far? And Elon Musk states, it's much easier to do the CGI that way. Go to this one scene here where he talks about what I'm really trying to achieve here is to make Mars seem possible. What do you mean seem possible? I mean make it a reality, not seem. Seem is like you're trying to fake something, of course. And again, all these people that worship Elon Musk like he's some type of god. But these people have been down a path of lies their entire lives from the school textbooks. And they can't get past the lies of what the textbooks have told them, what science has told them. And it just basically, they're going to be in denial. They're going to rage and get upset. But just take a listen once again.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The only limit to human future is in our own imaginations.
And with that goofy look on his face, he states the only limit to human future is our own imagination. So I find it very interesting. He's not saying it's based on technology, what's feasible based off technology. He says it's based on our imagination.
What I really want to try to achieve here is to make Mars seem possible. Mars seem possible. To make Mars seem possible. Make it seem as though it's something that we can do. Make it seem as though it's something that we can do. Make it seem as though it's something that we can do.
Now this is the plan. Get your ass to Mars.
Make it seem as though it's something that we can do. You know,
Get your ass to Mars. Get your ass to
here is to make Mars seem possible.
Watch it on the news. It was on CNN. It's true. I seen it on Fox. It's real. It's bullshit. It's bullshit.
Astronauts are really, really good at making pictures in space that look like you've never left the planet. In fact, it's almost hard-pressed to tell whether you're in space or not in this picture. You know, we've got some fancy backdrops, I guess.
You made me cry, you told me lies, you took me in and you drove me out, yeah, you had me hypnotized, yeah.
You look like you're in a studio, maybe in Omaha, Nebraska or something. The shot is so clear. Is this a hoax? Are you really in space still?
See the hair?
I don't know. We're going to have to do something for you.
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that. Watch this.
Mind control to Major Tom. Mind control to Major Tom. Mind control to Major Tom. Earth is flat and there's a dome above us all.
Oh, yeah, you are. Oh, yeah, you are. Oh, yeah, you are. Oh, yeah, you are.
My question is, through your career and your writing and your acting, you've inspired so many people to enter the sciences. How do you balance science with science fiction?
They're both the same.
Space, the final frontier.
Space may be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement.
And this is completely ridiculous. With the latest supposed Starman, it was bad enough with the supposed launch of the Falcon 9, launching satellites supposedly in outer space. Now with this whole entire Starman, it's completely ridiculous. Just take a look here at these stills. I mean, it looks fake because it is fake. And even Elon Musk admits it looks fake. This is a Hollywood basement production right in front of your face. There are absolutely no stars, no light in space whatsoever. You have no satellites in space. All you have is this bogus ball Earth in this bogus car with Starman inside. Let's take a listen to what Elon Musk says here during this press conference.
Ridiculous and impossible. And you can tell it's real because it looks so fake, honestly. Like, we'd have way better CGI if it was fake. But we didn't really test any of those materials for, is it space hardened or whatever, So it just has the same seats that like a normal car has. It's just literally a normal car.
And one thing I want to mention, I'm not saying they do not launch these rockets into the sky, but they definitely do not go into space. Let's just move this video forward here, where you see an actual rocket. But as I fast forward here, you're going to see with this launch, it definitely does not go into space. And let me back up here a little bit. So they cut it off at this point, before the rocket supposedly goes into outer space. And when it supposedly goes into outer space, they give you these basic CGI graphics. And this is their evidence that they're actually going in space. Cartoon, CGI. This is all the public needs. This is all the proof they need in the world. Just cartoon. And some guy who looks like he's watching the monitor of a real rocket when he's looking at nothing more than basically CGI. And we're supposed to take this seriously. And here's your bogus ball Earth. Looks like a Christmas tree all lit up. Back up here a little bit. I mean, it's a complete joke. And the public buys it. Doesn't matter if it's only CGI. It's good enough for them. All the trillions of dollars spent with all these so-called space programs, all we get is this garbage. Nothing real about it. Okay, let's move forward. I want to show something at the very end here with the person in charge of the European Space Agency. You just take a look here. I want to get right to the end. Okay, do you think this guy's serious whatsoever. Absolutely not. To him, it's a big joke. And he's just mocking. Take a look at that face as he looks towards the camera. He's saying, you people buy this. You people buy this. All we have to show you is basically a rocket launch into the sky, which does nothing more than basically crash into the ocean. And all we need to show you after that is a bogus ball Earth and a bogus rocket that's obviously, again, CGI. And that's all the public needs. With this CGI animation, at least they put some bogus stars in the back. And what do you see? Nothing but darkness. And Elon Musk is smiling throughout the whole entire press conference and admitting it looks fake. Again, these people are the so-called enlightened ones, mocking you, mocking those that believe them. And the sad thing is, the sad reality is, that all you that love SpaceX and all these other so-called space missions that are taking place, you don't realize people like myself making videos exposing these liars. We're telling you the absolute truth. They're faking space, but you don't want to hear that. Because, as always, the fantasy is better than the reality.
Mission Control, I've got some news for you. It's gonna shock you, so you better sit down. Listen very carefully. The Earth is flat, gentlemen.
How do you prove a black hole? How do you know those gravitational waves proved the collision of two black holes?
Somehow, eventually, they are able to observe phenomena.
No, they can't observe. It's too far away. It's too theoretical. How do we know what they're saying is true? You know what it really is? It's all science fiction.
Science and science fiction are essentially the same.
just my job 5 days a week. A rocket man. A rocket man. I can hear machinery blinding me with science. Science. It's poetry in motion. Can you hear me, Major Tom?
Okay, Phoebe, this is it. In this briefcase, I carry actual scientific facts. A briefcase of facts, if you will. Some of these fossils are over 200 million years old.
Okay, look, before you even start, I'm not denying evolution, okay? I'm just saying that it's one of the possibilities.
It's the only possibility, Phoebe.
Okay, Ross, could you just open your mind like this much? Okay? Now, wasn't there a time when the brightest minds in the world believed that the Earth was flat? And up until, like, what, 50 years ago, you all thought the atom was the smallest thing until you split it open and this, like, whole mess of crap came out. Now, are you telling me that you are so unbelievably arrogant that you can't admit that there's a teeny tiny possibility that you could be wrong about this?
There might be.
Choke, choke again. I thought my demons were my friends. Pity me, in the end they're out to get me. Since I was young, I've tasted sorrow on my tongue, and this sweet sugar gun does not protect me.
How many of you have heard of the game Whispered Down the Lane? Who is most likely to have the truth? The one closest or the one farthest away from the original source information? Closest. Well, isn't it interesting that those closest to the origin of everything, who is smarter, them or us? I mean, they're out there building stuff like this, and many more that I didn't depict here, that we still don't have a clue how they did it. With all of our computers and technology and everything, we still look at some of the things in the ancient world and we're dumbfounded. So what do we say? Ancient aliens did it! Because when we come from an evolutionary mindset, the further back we go, the more ape-like and stupid people were. Right? Cavemen, rock, you know. Right? Even if you don't believe in evolution, we tend to still have that mindset that the further back we go, we're talking about ignorant, stupid people. And yet the evidence shows otherwise. But the funny thing is, the people who are building stuff like this that we still can't figure out today had this cosmological worldview. And from the biblical perspective, the Hebrews had the same worldview. Nearly every ancient culture, for 4,000 years, saying we are on a circular, still flat earth set on pillars under a dome within which are the sun, moon, and stars. Flash forward about 6,000 years on the biblical timeline, and I heard we're on a spinning heliocentric ball in an ever-expanding universe.
What would you say to some of the parents who are like, look, you know, we're going to go ahead, we'll learn about evolution, but we also believe in creationism. What is the harm in learning the Bible's creation story?
Well, learning the story is fine. I mean, that's great, but it's not science. And tax dollars used for science education shouldn't be used to teach creationism as an alternative.
That's insane. But that's in college-level science books being passed off as fact. Guys, that's outrageous. How we can continue to tolerate such absolute absurdity, it's beyond me. This is not science. This is the natural result of the depravity that comes from ignoring the Word of God, and it's the byproduct of hating God. But this is the journey that I've been on for 2 years now, is trying to figure this stuff out. Because any direction you look, it gets more and more absurd, just completely ridiculous. And so that caused me to start asking questions like this. Can we trust Genesis? Because we have scriptures like this in Isaiah that talks about God declares the end from the beginning. So those of you who come from a biblical worldview, how many of you think we're getting pretty close to the end over here? So if we want to understand the end, then we got to go back to the beginning. We have to understand the beginning to understand the end. He declares the end from the beginning, and the Apostle Paul said that now these things happen to them being the people in the Torah in the beginning, for examples. They serve as examples for us upon whom the ends of the ages have come. So he says we got to understand that if we want to understand what's going to happen in the end times. A lot of people are trying to say this whole flat earth thing is a psyop. It started with the CIA or some other, the Illuminati or whatever. If it's a psyop, it started with Moses. In Genesis chapter 1. Here we go. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. Now, a lot of scholars are out there today suggesting or demanding that the word firmament is simply an expanse. It's the expanse of the air, the atmosphere, and the vacuum of space. Funny thing is, the Hebrews and the Greeks disagree with that. Especially the Hebrew scholars that took their Hebrew text and translated the Hebrew into Greek. So these are Hebrew people who understand their Hebrew culture, their Hebrew scriptures. They took the Hebrew words and translated them into Greek for the Septuagint. And the word that they chose for the Hebrew word rakia, when they translated it into Greek, was stereoma. And when you just look at other online resources such as blueletterbible.com, look up the word rakia, you'll see right there it's an extended surface, solid, expanse, firmament, expanse, flat as base, support, firmament of a vault of heaven supporting waters above, considered by Hebrews as solid and supporting waters above. And Job, which I believe actually predates Genesis, comes right out and tells you. In Job chapter 37, verse 18, pick your translation. I grew up in the King James. So the King James says, hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong as a molten looking glass? What's a molten looking glass? It's a mirror made out of beaten down metal. I mean, Job comes right out and tells you this thing is hard. It's like a molten mirror. We see in Ezekiel 1:26, and above the firmament that was over their heads was the likeness of a throne, but we see that his throne is sitting on top of this structure, according to Ezekiel. We see in Isaiah, heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool. We see in Amos chapter 9, verse 6, the one who builds his upper chambers in the heavens and has founded his vaulted dome. The word is aguda, a structure fitted together over the earth. He who calls for the waters of the sea and pours them out on the face of the earth, the Lord Yahuwah is his name.
Amos 9:6 is a very interesting passage of Scripture. And the King James says he founds his troop on the earth. New International Version, however, says that he builds his lofty place in the heavens and sets its foundation on the earth. New Living Translation says that the Lord's home reaches up to the heavens while its foundation is on the earth. The English Standard Version says, who builds his upper chambers in the heavens and founds his vault upon the earth. The Net Bible says he builds his upper rooms of his palace in heaven and sets its foundation supports on the earth. So what's going on with all that? Well, we talked a little bit about that in the interview I did with Zen Garcia, so I'll just play that for you here. Let's talk some more about the vaulted dome. You mentioned ilovebiblehub.com also, and earlier you talked about Amos 9:6, which is, if you're a King James only guy, you completely miss it. King James says, "It is he that buildeth his stories in the heaven and hath founded his troop in the earth." You're like, what? But like all the other translations pretty much talk about this vault that's set upon the earth, and the New American Standard is the one that just comes right out and calls it a vaulted dome. So what did you find? Why did the King James use troop? Did you look into that at all? Or
well, when you look up the word aguda, binding in this case, the firmament to the earth, which makes a lot more sense. Because if you read the first portion of the chapter or the passage, it says the one who builds his upper chambers in the heavens. So it's actually speaking about first where the Most High God sits upon the dome. When you look at the context of the passage, it should be translated as the vaulted dome, which binds the earth to the firmament.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, because right in the King James, it's he that buildeth his stories in the heavens. So you got this idea of stories or levels being built in heaven, but founded his troop, his was it aguda?
Yes, aguda.
Being like bound together, attached, as it were, to the earth. Wow, that is awesome.
Language 101, words mean things. And the prophet Isaiah knew the difference between a ball and a circle, because he used the Hebrew word for ball in Isaiah 22:18, but he chose a different word for Isaiah 40:22. So I'm looking at them going, okay, Isaiah knew the difference, the King James translators knew the difference. Do we know the difference? Google helps you out. You could go to Google and type in ball. You could go in Google and type in circle, and you might see something like that depicted there. So here's a little quiz. Which one do you think is which? This is a ball. This is a circle. So then the next thing people go is, well, look at everything else out there. Mars and Jupiter and Venus and the sun and moon. Everything else is spherical, so we must be too. Well, I mean, okay. Just because these balls are round, does that mean the courts, fields, lanes, tables must be too? Does that demand ipso facto, if the billiard balls are all spherical, that the pool table must be too? Biblically speaking, this place is center stage, main attraction. Everything else is up there to serve a purpose for those who are here. Also, we note that it says that heaven is stretched out like a tent to dwell in. Well, I mean, they're using a metaphor there. I mean, in their time, this would be a tent. A structure set up over a flat surface. Perhaps even a structure like this, a yurt. Or more modern times, you might think of something like a dome tent. Now, as I started doing this research, I'm having all the same thoughts you're having. And I'm getting really frustrated by this whole thing. And people are constantly telling me I'm crazy for even looking into it. And it was getting hard. It was really getting very difficult, especially in the beginning. I've been looking into this stuff since April 15th of 2015. Almost nonstop. I've become obsessed with it, actually. And I was ready to throw in the towel. I was just like, everybody's calling me a psycho, crazy lunatic, and, writing me off as, whatever. And, you know, it wears on you after a while. You know, people calling you names every day. And I was ready to throw in the towel. I was done. Then I got this package in the mail. And I am a very busy person. And if it's more than like a page or so, it goes into the I'll get to it later pile, which I almost never get around to getting back to it. Then this guy called me, and I'm really hard to get a hold of by phone. And the only time I take or make phone calls is when I'm in my car. And this guy happened to call me when I was in my car and said, "Did you get a package from this guy named Andrew Hoy?" And I said, "The name sounds familiar, but you know, I'm not sure." He said, "Well, you need to look and see if you got a package for him, because if you did, you've got to open it and check it out." I thought, okay. So when I got home, looked through my pile, I found the package, and it was this big 8.5 by 11 sheet or envelope. It was about this thick. I go, oh boy, here we go. So I open up, I read the cover letter, and then I open through it. This guy's a structural engineer and a Hebrew scholar. And he spent a lot of time in Israel studying the tabernacle in the wilderness. And as a structural engineer, he's looking at all the various models that you can see that people have in museums and whatnot of the tabernacle in the wilderness. And you guys have all seen the same thing too, this long rectangular box, right? Tabernacle in the wilderness. Now the Torah says that you cannot add to it or subtract from it. It comes with a very strict command. Are you guys familiar with that in the Torah? It says do not add to it and do not subtract from it. So here's Andrew, structural engineer, is looking at this box structure, which is the least structural supported thing you can make out in the wilderness. And because it is so is poorly, you know, it's not very structurally sound, they have to add extra poles and extra rope and extra pegs and all kinds of extra stuff to make that thing stand upright and stay upright in wind and rain and things like that. So he's stuck. He's like, look, Moses was given blueprints from something he saw up in the heavenlies that he was supposed to emulate here on earth. He was given a very specific itemized shopping list to hand off to Bezalel, who was the guy and his friend who were supposed to construct all this stuff. So he's saying, well, all these people have added all kinds of things to the itemized list that weren't given to them. So he really struggled with it. And he was like, why did they even come up with a rectangular box with multiple layers of cloth on the roof? And he realized it's because of the description of the curtains that are given in the text. It gives this description of these curtains that are long rectangular strips. And it just says connect them at the ends. Well, everybody assumes that you connect them at the long end. And when you do that, you end up with a rectangular box. But there's nothing in the text that demands that. So he thought, well, what if you connected them at the short ends? What would happen? When he did that, he ended up with a very large circular dome tent, 6 stories high, without adding or subtracting any items to the list. Wow! A 6-story high dome tent with the pillar of fire going down through the middle of it. So you can imagine that was a pretty impressive sight in the wilderness if this model is true. But you got to understand my mindset at this point. I've been studying this whole firmament and this dome circular world and all this stuff for quite some time, ready to throw in the towel. I'm giving up. And I get this in the mail. And this guy, he doesn't have anything to do with flat earth or anything like that, not even remotely on his mind. But he designs this thing and he realizes that pi very much plays a part of this design. And so he starts looking up pictures of the globe that he could use that are royalty-free images that he can use for his promotional materials. And he's trying to, get support in Israel and stuff for people to look into this model. And as he started looking into the pictures of the globe, he found the same problems that I found when you start looking into pictures of the globe. Many, if not all, of the pictures you see of the globe in your textbooks and stuff like that are composite images. They're CGI. And many times it even says so in the fine print. And seeing images of the Earth in 25-hour animation, and none of the clouds are moving as this thing's rotating in 25 hours, I started to question the globe.
Now, if that's true, that would be unbelievably huge confirmation of the Hebraic cosmological worldview depicted in a practical structure that is our world in which God himself desires to dwell with his creation. But I could just tell you, the way I ended up finding out about him in the first place was about this time last year. Many of you know, it was actually August 16th. I was taking so much ridicule and flack and name calling and just mean-spirited people attacking me from every corner you can imagine, that I decided, you know what, forget it. I'm done. I'm taking my Testing the Globe website down. I put the Phil Collins song "I Don't Care Anymore" up on every single page, and said, forget it. I'm done. Then I got a bunch of letters from people, both handwritten as well as emailed to me. One in particular that was sent to me was handwritten by an atheist, and he was sharing his testimony and how this research led him to a belief that there has to be a God. I've often joked about it, that there are no atheists in foxholes. Well, there are no atheists in a terrarium either. And this person had taken time to watch the videos, unlike other people who ridicule and condemn without investigation. This person had taken time to look at the various videos that I've produced, and they came to the conclusion, that's the truth, and God's right above us, and I now believe in God, so I better get right with him. And and in a polite way, but in a firm way, this person rebuked me for taking all that information down. They said, how dare you? I mean, do you not believe what you're saying? And it was a polite but firm rebuke. And then he ended his letter by saying, I'm going to say something I've never said before, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, may God grant you the grace and the courage and the strength to continue on the path that he's placed you on. And wow, I mean, it really hit me. And so, I mean, it was a rough season. I can't even convey to you everything that was going on at that time. And, here I am just asking questions at that time. I'm just like, hey, this is interesting. And wow, look what the Bible says. And just trying to figure this stuff out for myself, and realized, you know what, people don't appreciate you asking questions, and they will go completely psycho on you. We had lost pretty much all financial support. That had all dried up because apparently everybody thought I was crazy. I mean, if you go to look on the customer reviews on some of my books on Amazon, you'll see people like, yeah, I was interested in this book at first. Then I found out that this guy's a flat earther. So how smart could he be? And, this guy must be an idiot. So I stopped reading, So, I mean, that was the mindset. People were like, Skiba's lost his mind. And, I had $800 to my name, all kinds of stuff was going on. And I was beaten down. I mean, I don't know what else to say, except I was ready to throw the towel in for sure. And it was in that season that I get this package in the mail from Andrew Hoy. He was just realizing from his own research as a structural engineer, as a Hebrew scholar, and just looking at the text and not adding anything to it, just taking the itemized shopping list as it was. And he comes up with this model. And when he realized that it represented pi, he was trying to associate the globe with it. But he kept running into the same thing I did, that when you start looking at these pictures, you start seeing words like composite and rendering and, all these things that show this is not a legitimate picture of the Earth. And when I was doing the same questioning, like, what the heck, all these Earths, and look at all this discrepancy, and look at these clone tools, and, do we actually have any representations of the Earth that are real and legitimate? And, various different scales, all the colors always wrong. You got Apollo 11 faking the Earth through the oval window of the capsule. I mean, just lots of stuff. Well, he starts stumbling on some of this stuff, sees this model that I've created of the circular dome enclosed world, and he's going, I think I need to contact this guy. So he sends the stuff, and long story short, I finally get a chance to look at his material. I look at it, and this is when, again, I'm ready to throw the towel on this whole deal. I'm like, man, I just, it was causing more trouble than it was worth. And I see this, and I'm like, really, God, are you kidding me? Could it really be that the tabernacle in the wilderness was a scaled down representation of Yahuwah's footstool? And thinking about the Levites, I want to point something out to you. If you go back to Numbers chapter 1, it says, For the Lord had spoken unto Moses, saying, Only thou shalt not number the tribe of Levi, neither take the sum of them among the children of Israel, But thou shalt appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of testimony. So they're put in charge of the tabernacle. And over the vessels thereof, and over the things that belong to it, they shall bear the tabernacle, and all the vessels thereof, and they shall minister unto it, and shall encamp round about the tabernacle. Round about? And when the tabernacle setteth forth, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up, and the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death. And the children of Israel shall pitch their tents, every man by his own camp, and every man by his own standard, throughout their hosts. But the Levites shall pitch round about the tabernacle of testimony, that there be no wrath upon the congregation of the children of Israel. And the Levites shall keep the charge of the tabernacle of testimony. Now, I suppose you could say that they were just camping all around the tabernacle. Okay, sure. But could they be literally camped around a round tabernacle? I'm just saying, maybe we take this a little bit more literally. In fact, if this is accurately depicted, I wonder if that's what this whole outer area is right here. Maybe their tents were along this perimeter all the way around it. When you get to Numbers chapter 3, we find out how many Levites there were, at least at this census, when they took the census here. And all that were numbered of the Levites, which Moses and Aaron numbered at the commandment of the Lord throughout their families, all the males from a month old and upward, were 20 and 2,000. So there's 22,000 Levites at the time of this census in Numbers chapter 3. Well, the reason I went back to look at that stuff is because not too long ago we did our Torah portion on Numbers chapter 18, and I was looking at verses 6 through 10 in particular. This is what caught my attention in verse 10. In the most holy place shalt thou eat it. Every male shall eat it. It shall be holy unto thee. So every male is commanded to eat of this in the most holy place. Well, I mean, if you look at the scale that's typically depicted in the rectangular box, how do you get 22,000 people to eat inside of there? Whereas if you look at the scale of Andrew's model, I wrote to him after we did this Torah portion. I said, hey, Andy, I could see it being a lot more feasible doing shifts in a large, something that looks like a circus tent than in that tiny little rectangular box. Numbers 18 verse 10, at least for me, was very compelling potential evidence to support Andrew's model. That and the fact that we got to remember, Isaiah said that the heavens or the sky, the firmament, was stretched out like a tent to dwell in over a circular earth. A tent to dwell in does not fit any idea or any notion of an expanse as in atmosphere, air, and the vacuum of space.
What was placed inside the tent? Genesis 1 continues in verse 9. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. Okay, stop. How did the dry land appear? How did it appear? How did it get there? Well, we have plenty of other texts that give us a little bit more information, such as in Job. Job 38. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof? In 1 Samuel 2:8, he raiseth up the poor out of the dust, and lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among princes, to make them inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he hath set the world upon them. 2 Samuel 22:16, and the channels of the sea appeared, the foundations of the world were discovered. Psalm 102:25, of old hast thou laid the foundations of the earth. Proverbs 8:27, when he established the heavens, I was there. When he inscribed a circle on the face of the deep. That's how the dry land appeared. So we see that, how did the dry land appear? Well, it was somehow inscribed into something else as a circle. What else was inside the firmament? This is where I really started getting tripped up with this whole thing. So when we get to day 4, verse 14, and God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the fourth day. We see also that these heavenly luminaries that were created on day 4 and placed inside the firmament, they are moving, not the earth. Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of the Lord, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle, or a tent, for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. His going forth is from the end of heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it. And there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. I found it really interesting that Wernher von Braun, one of the founding members of NASA, has a very simple tombstone. He's got his name and the years that he lived, and he's got Psalm 19:1. Right there. Interesting. When I was trying to figure out how all that worked, I was actually struggling with how does the 24-hour sun in Antarctica work, if this is a circular enclosed world model. And so I used this software called Stellarium. So I set my location in the software to Antarctica, and I decided I wanted to use the camera. You have camera options in there. So you're looking at north, south, east, west, all straight up in the sky. So you see the sun and moon going around you. And I just let the software go. I started in January, and I went all the way through the end of December and recorded it. And then I took that same animation. All I did is put it in the software and flip it, so it's going the other way, and superimpose it over the circular map. And using spinning heliocentric globe-based software, it showed how the sun and moon could be moving over the circular map. And it also showed, this is why I have January and June together, that it speeds up and slows down. I didn't do anything to make this happen. This happened in Stellarium's globe-based heliocentric software. It showed the sun and moon slowing down and speeding up. Slowing down as it gets toward the inner circle, speeding up as it gets toward the outer, as it goes between the tropics, through the equator to the tropics and then back up again. Spinning heliocentric software showed that. Scriptures in about 67 places describe the sun, moon, and stars moving. 0 in reference to the earth in any form of movement, rotation or orbit or otherwise.
And as soon as I got back from Amsterdam, I went on Facebook and I was just checking some of my messages, looking at my news feed, and I saw an ad for this interesting little clock right here that has a levitating ball going around a circular disc. Now I'm just going to go out on a limb here and suggest that if human beings can come up with something like this, maybe, just maybe, Yahuwah could do the same thing, and probably a lot better. Just saying.
Let's break it down. We live in a self-contained, three-tiered system. These are all the scriptures that tell us so. Quite a few. There is a solid firmament, dome, vault over us. These are all the scriptures and other extra-biblical texts written by the Hebrews that say the same thing. Yahuwah's throne sits above the heavens, or the waters are above there also. These are the scriptures. Quite a few of them. Scripture says it takes 2 to 3 witnesses to establish truth. You're noticing that there are more than 2 or 3 witnesses showing up here. The earth is inscribed in this circular flat fashion into something with 4 corners and surrounded by water, and all those texts that you see there. The sun, moon, and stars are in the firmament, and the stars shall fall to earth. That one's a heavy one right there. Okay, this is where it really started getting crazy for me. Isaiah, Peter, John, and Yeshua himself, the Son of God, Jesus Christ. All 4 of these guys. These are 4 pretty big heavy hitters in Scripture, wouldn't you say? Isaiah, Yeshua, Peter, John. All 4 of these guys said all the stars are going to fall to earth. All the stars are going to fall to earth. We got many scriptures talking about it. So, guys, are you still taking the Bible literally? We agreed in the beginning we should. If you still think we should take the Bible literally, you got Yeshua, the Son of God, Jesus Christ himself, Isaiah, Peter, and John telling you all the stars are going to fall to earth. Put that in perspective. That's just one galaxy. You've got pictures like this. All the stars are going to fall to earth. If that's true, we got bigger problems than terrorism and the Antichrist. If Andromeda's heading our way, it's going to be a bad day. So somebody's wrong here. Isaiah, Yeshua, Peter, John, all said all the stars are going to fall to earth. Carl Sagan, Neil deGrasse Tyson, all these other guys, Michio Kaku, say these are spinning galaxies with billions and billions of stars, all with planets going around them, are coming to earth. Someone's lying. I don't know about you, but I'm not prepared to say that it's Isaiah, Yeshua, Peter, or John. It's kind of poetic that I'm having this talk here in a venue called the Milky Way. The God's got a sense of humor. Because I'll tell you what, if Isaiah, Yeshua, Peter, and John are right, they're not billions of light years away. And they're not huge. Start looking into that. If we look at the sun, let's say it's about this big from our perspective, right? And they say the sun is 93 million miles away, right? Okay, let's double the distance. What happens to the size? You half the size, right? Let's keep doing that until our sun looks the same size as all the other stars that we see. You basically end up at the distance of Pluto, according to that model. Okay? And then they say, well, look at all those other stars. They're so far away. If we're only at the distance of Pluto from our sun, and our sun looks like a star just like all the other ones, then those other stars that are the same size that our sun looks like from Pluto, those suns must obviously be way bigger. So how many of you have seen the pictures of, here's the Earth and here's Arcturus and Betelgeuse? Do you see how they're backwards engineering this? And then they'll say that the North Star, because the North Star doesn't have perceived parallax. You know what parallax is? Motion parallax. When you're driving in your car and the trees are right on the side of the road are whipping by, but the mountains in the distance are barely moving at all, right? That's motion parallax. Well, we see other things zipping by and stuff like that, but we look at objects like the North Star, and it doesn't really appear to be moving. So therefore, it must be really far away because there's not much perceived parallax. But if it's really far away, and it's supposedly 300, I think, light years away, if you do the math out on that, I think a light year is like 6 trillion miles, I forget. And you figure that out, how far away do you believe you actually see something that far away? Really? And how big does that thing have to be at 300 light years away for me to be able to see it? So you start thinking this way, you're like, why did I believe half the things that they're telling me? I think a lot of people are starting to scratch their heads and ask the same question. Judges chapter 5. What are stars? You know, if they're not, well, by the way, it says that God created the sun, and when he wrote about the stars, we get one little half a sentence. And he created the stars also. That's a little anticlimactic if the stars are really what we're told they are. Yeah, and he created the stars too. Yeah. But you'll notice they're two separate things. He created the sun and the stars, which means the sun is not a star and the stars are not suns. But in what we're told, they're one and the same. Our sun is just a star, right? And all the stars are suns with planets going around them. And they're telling us that we're seeing Earth 2.0 out there, the Kepler, right? Look at how far away they say those. I think it was like, I forget what it was. Whatever it was, you do the math out on there. I'm like, yeah, do you really believe we can see that far? Crazy. Biblically speaking, what are the stars? Well, you see things like stars fighting in heaven in Judges chapter 5. You see fifth angel sounded in Revelation 9, and I saw a star fall from heaven, and to him was given the key to the bottomless pit. Revelation talks about the dragon taking down 1/3 of the stars and casting them to earth. the hosts of heaven. Over and over and over again, when you look through the scriptures, you see the word star is synonymous for angel. Angels are described as stars. Stars are described as angels. The hosts of heaven are described as the constellations, but they're also described as the armies of heaven. And various people in the biblical account were worshiping them as gods, sentient entities. All through the scriptures, stars are referred to back and forth: angels, stars, stars, angels, hosts of heaven, armies of heaven. The book of Enoch comes right out and tells you point blank that the stars are a class of angel called the heavenly luminaries. And they are decreed to stay in a very specific pattern in the sky and not deviate it from it at all, or they'll suffer a very severe punishment. And Raguel is an angel who was assigned as basically a heavenly police officer to make sure that they stay where they're supposed to. There are some who decided they didn't want to do that, and they are the wandering stars that Jude wrote about that are reserved for judgment. There are floodgates or windows in the firmament. We see in the text right there. The earth is geocentric, stationary. It's a stationary world set on pillars, as we see there. I wonder what Enoch would be like if I went back to it and read it from this cosmological worldview instead of the previous worldview that I had. And so I opened up the book and I dog-eared it to the end of chapter 71, which means I start in chapter 72. Well, that's where the heavenly luminaries come into play. And the way it describes it in the book of Enoch, if you come from a spinning heliocentric globe-based mindset, chapter 72 through about the late 80s make no sense at all. It's total gibberish. And that's why a lot of people write it off as nonsense. But Enoch didn't have that cosmological worldview. So if you read it with the cosmological worldview that the ancients had, it makes perfect sense. And when I got to chapter 89, I just had to laugh, because some of my colleagues who think I'm crazy for even talking about this stuff, who also hold the book of Enoch in fairly high regard and consider it authoritative, they want to ignore chapter 89. Chapter 89 is a slam dunk for the flat earthers. Chapter 89, and again I raised mine eyes toward heaven and saw a lofty roof with 7 water torrents thereon, and those torrents flowed with much water into an enclosure. This is Enoch having a vision of the coming flood. All right? And he's looking up and he's seeing a roof that has openings in it, and these water torrents are coming down and filling up an enclosure. And he says it like 4 or 5 times right there, over and over and over again. If you just read the text, I mean, that is a slam dunk for the model that I've been showing you. And there's no way you can use this text to twist, mangle, and distort it into some understanding of a spinning heliocentric globular model of the earth. Can't be done. And we see in Genesis that it agrees. There were windows of heaven that opened up. Doesn't talk about fluffy clouds raining down. So, I had to look at it and go, which one makes more sense? I got to be honest with you, the one on the left made a lot more sense as I was just looking at the text for what it said. When you look at the whole of Scripture, and if you believe it's Holy Spirit inspired, then they're all in unity. They're all in agreement. Everybody is saying the same thing. I'm going, well, he's not saying the earth is just hanging in space. It's saying it's hanging on no thing. It's not hanging on anything. Why is it not hanging on anything? Because we see over and over and over again it's set on pillars. So it's hanging on no thing. It's not just floating out there in space. Well, I mean, I'm one of those that have built my life on saying that my Bible is my source for truth, that it was Holy Spirit-inspired authors who wrote it, and that I can trust it. Well, I found myself in a lot of trouble when I did that, when I started looking into this. And you look into Edwin Hubble, and you read some of his quotes, and he talks about the idea that we could be the center of attention, the earth. That he would use words like horror at the prospect that we could be that important. So it was inconceivable in his mind, so as a result, he has a preconceived notion. I can't believe that, so I've got to come up with something else. So he starts looking at blurry dots through his telescope and spiral-looking things through the telescope that used to be called nebula. And he applied the word galaxy to it. Anybody know what the word galaxy means? It means Milky Way. This word galaxy means Milky Way. So when we say the Milky Way galaxy, we're really being kind of redundant. It's the Milky Way, Milky Way. It's really milky. So he looks at all those other things, and and says, okay, that's spiral, and I see this thing over here, it looks like this Milky Way thing, and so maybe that's the wing of the spiral arms. We're in a spiral galaxy too. Now, he just applied the word to those spiral things, said those are galaxies. So then he says that we must be in one too. And then, shortly after that, we have textbooks that I saw when I was in school that showed the Milky Way spiral galaxy with a spiral arm and a square over one corner of it and a little dot. It says, you are here. And I raised my hand and said, who took that picture? I mean, you have to be in Andromeda to take that picture. But yet they have the audacity to pass that off like they actually know what they're talking about. They don't say theory. They say, this is a fact. You are here. We're on this wing, this arm of the spiral galaxy known as the Milky Way. You are here. No proof, no evidence, nothing. And Hubble's looking out there and he's like, okay, so red, I see red stars. Well, we know that color frequencies have different wavelengths, right? Blue has a tighter wavelength and red has a longer one. So if we're seeing it and it's red, that means it's really blue, but by the time the light is reaching us, it has red shifted into the color spectrum of red, and that's why we see it that way. So he starts with a preconceived notion that that speck of light that's red, and he says it's 14 light years away, is really blue, but we're seeing it red because it's so far away. I'm like, wait a minute. You just said that thing's 14 light years away. How the heck do you know what color it is? What if it's just red? I see green lights right there, a blue one, red one, yellow. What if it's just red? You see the assumptions that they start to make? Then they write it off as fact and they pass it off to us. And we read it in school. We just, well, smart people said it, so it must be true. And when you look at some of these scientists, they're kind of realizing the same thing. Michio Kaku, this is a quote from him. He says, usually in science, if we're off by a factor of 2 or a factor of 10, we call that horrible. We say something's wrong with the theory. We're off by a factor of 10. However, in cosmology, we're off by a factor of 10 to the 120th. That is 1 with 120 zeros after it. That's how much they're admitting they're wrong. This is the largest mismatch between theory and experiment in the history of science. In other words, you're telling us you're clueless. So why should we listen to these people? That most of the stuff that they're coming up with was derived from theoretical physicists and stuff writing on chalkboards. In fact, Nikola Tesla had something to say about those guys. He said, today's scientists have substituted mathematics for experiments, and they wander off through equation after equation and eventually build a structure which has no relation to reality. You can make math say just about anything you want it to say. And most of us don't understand it enough, so we look at this big chalkboard full of squiggly lines, and we're like, okay, well, he's smart, so I guess I'll believe him. And yet you have these same smart guys going, we're off by 1 to 120 zeros on their chalkboard stuff. If we're on a spinning heliocentric ball, we've got some big problems when we look at some of the other stories. Like Joshua commanding the sun to stand still. Now, if you look at some of my other DVDs and stuff that I've produced, you'll hear me saying stuff. I'll even come right out and say in the video, I said, if my understanding of the cosmos is correct, for that to happen, that means the Earth stopped rotating. Because we're told the sun moves across the sky, right? Because the Earth's moving, rotating, right? It gets even worse if you start talking about the moon stopping too. And they stopped over very specific locations. Now, if you just do a Google search on what would happen if the Earth stopped rotating, for those who come from that cosmological worldview, you got really big problems. 1,000-mile-an-hour wind shear because the atmosphere is supposedly attached to the Earth too. You lose the gravitational field. People are flying out into space. You got big problems if the Earth stops rotating. Well, what if they just meant what they said? That the sun and moon are moving and they stopped, not the Earth. Wow, that's pretty crazy. Other difficult scriptures to reconcile. Oh, by the way, I didn't put it in here, I don't think, but we had Joshua commanding the sun to stand still. It gets worse when Hezekiah makes the sun go backwards 10 degrees. All right? Wait a minute. That means the Earth stopped rotating, rotated backwards, and then spun back up to 1,000 miles an hour again. By the way, where do we see in the Genesis account anything about the Earth spinning? And what was the Earth doing while it was waiting for 3 days for the sun to show up? Heliocentric. Centered on Helios. Pagan sun god. The sun. Heliocentricity puts all the focus on the sun. Geocentricity, the biblical model, the focus is here. And the scientists are realizing, hey, we must be important because everything shows that we're in the center. Everything's moving away at the same rate in all directions from us. We are it. We're the center. Whoa, what does that mean? Pillars of the earth. We've seen that one already in Job 9:6. In Psalm 75:3, the earth and all the inhabitants thereof are dissolved. I bear up the pillars of it. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and he has set the world upon them. Okay, where are the pillars that the world supposedly set on? I'm not seeing it. Daniel talks about a vision of a tree that grows so big that the whole world could see that. How does that work on a ball? Okay, it was just a dream. Okay, fine. Yeshua was taken to a high mountain and shown all the kingdoms of the world. How does that happen on a ball? I don't know. When he comes back, it says every eye is going to see him. How's that work? Oh, he's going to make a round trip. He's going to take some laps around the earth. Well, I don't remember reading that. As I read it, it looks like he's got a direct flight from the clouds to the Mount of Olives. But if he shows up on that side, how are those guys going to see him? Well, we got iPhones and the internet. Okay, read the book of Revelation and tell me how you think iPhones and the internet is still going to be working. I used to use that myself. I say, well, you got cable TV and satellites and all that stuff. Yeah, and when something crazy happens, everybody's got their iPhone out, right? Read the book of Revelation and tell me how you think that's going to work. I used to say that myself. Because what we're trying to say is, whether you believe what I'm saying or not, is get out there and start testing it for yourself. Understand why you believe what you believe. Because we've already established everything we believe is absurd anyway. Doesn't matter which worldview you come from, it's absurd. But do you know why you believe what you believe? Or do you believe it just because somebody told you something for your whole life and now you believe it? For me, there's a lot of things that, you walk in first day of school, kindergarten, and there's the globe right there. I was born June 26, 1969. On July 20th, 1969, men were supposedly walking on the moon. And I was sitting on my mother's lap watching it. And as a result, I wanted to be an astronaut. So if you're having problems with this research and this stuff, just imagine what's going on in my head as I start looking at this. Which one is it? The textbooks are telling us that this is an oblate spheroid. Have you read about that? Heard about that? An oblate spheroid. This guy right here says, no, it's pear-shaped. Then, of course, you got NASA pumping out pictures all the time as a perfectly spherical Earth. And you got the Bible saying, no, you live in a snow globe. So, which one is it? Why do you believe what you believe? Prove it without using NASA or any other space agency, the government or military of any country in the world. Why would I say that? NASA has been proven to be liars time and time again. I could spend a whole weekend here showing you the lies of NASA. Are all proven liars. Why would you trust them? Fool me once, right? Shame on you. Fool me twice. Shame on me. I say, continue to believe pathological liars and you're an idiot. But that's what we've all done. How many of you believe your government is 100% honest and can be trustworthy? Come on. Okay, so you don't, one person suffering from severe cognitive dissonance. And so, I look at these stuff, we've all seen the textbooks, we've all seen the videos and movies and all these things, and there's so much of it. Do you know what the budget NASA has? Do you know how much they get, how much money they get? Tens of billions of dollars a year. Have you seen the movie Gravity? Okay. That's made for about $100 million, give or take. And if you saw the movie Gravity, that was pretty impressive. I saw it on IMAX, big screen, like, wow. I mean, I felt like I was with Sandra Bullock flying around in space, freaking out myself. Very impressive. Just saw the movie, Passengers, I think it's called. Same thing. Okay, this is what they're able to do with $100 million. What are you able to do with tens of billions of dollars a year since the 60s? So you have organizations, people say, well, it's too big a conspiracy. There's no way, too big a conspiracy, too big a... No, it isn't. There's supposedly over 7 billion people on the earth today, right? Look up how many people have allegedly been to space. It's about 550 out of 7 billion. And most of the astronauts are military trained. I was in the military. We're trained to keep secrets. Right? Yeah. I say, don't trust me either. And they're Freemasons. Okay, secret, all over the place. 500-something people. It's not too hard. The mechanic has no idea what the king knows. Right? There are people working for these agencies that believe what they're doing is what they're doing. They're making parts. They're going to go on something that's going to get launched up somewhere. Are they in on the conspiracy? No. They're just doing their job. But I'll tell you, some of these people are starting to question their job. People say, we've all seen the curve. If you ever look out, you ever fly in an airplane, you're an idiot. If you ever flown in an airplane, you've seen the curve. I've flown in airplanes lots of times. And I would have said before doing this research that I saw the curve too. But you didn't. And I'm going to challenge you to start looking for the curve. If you've ever been to the ocean, you've seen the curve. Okay, prove it. If you've ever been to the beach, you've seen ships go over the curve. Okay. Go buy the Nikon Coolpix P900 camera. Has an 83 power optical zoom lens with a digital zoom that effectively doubles that. I'll just say, go have fun. Go watch ships disappear over the curve. I went to an electronic superstore one day. I had already bought mine, and it took me a long time to get a hold of these cameras because they were always out of stock. And I went to this one superstore, and they were out of stock. And the guy that was there, I was asking him about it. He goes, yeah, we can't seem to get them. He said, I want to check it out too. I've been hearing a lot about this camera. I said, yeah, I know why you can't find them anywhere. He goes, really? Why? I said, do you know what cognitive dissonance is? No? Well, it's when you believe something to be true and then somebody challenges it and you think the other guy's an idiot. Oh, okay. Okay, so with that being said, would you like me to continue? Yeah. Flat earthers are buying them all up. What? I said, cognitive dissonance. Remember that? Because I live right near a place called Lake Louisville that has a good 7-mile stretch that I shouldn't be able to see stuff on the other side that I could see. And I started telling them stuff, and you guys remember the cartoon, The Flintstones? There's that sound effect. It's like that's the sound you hear when the gerbil jumps off the wheel in somebody's head. Hey, check this out. Look at that. You watch the ship go out, and you see it disappear from your eye because of perspective and all kinds of other stuff. It looks like it's disappeared. Hey, let's get the camera out. Zoom in. There it is. And if you've been watching my YouTube channel, you've seen a lot of other videos on it as well. So, I mean, as you do this research, what ends up happening is you'll think you come to a solid conclusion. I proved this. All right. But then the yeah, but guy shows up. Well, yeah, but. And whatever his yeah, but is, well, it kind of makes sense. So then you go, well, yeah, but, and you play the yeah, but game for infinity. It never ends. And I just came to the conclusion for myself that, you know what, how long are you going to waver between two opinions? I'm just going to have to make a choice. And it's going to be a choice based on belief. Yes, I have plenty of other proofs and things that I have done that have helped along the way. But for me, it came down to let God be true and every man a liar. I have a belief. But what did we already establish at the beginning of this presentation? Belief is absurd. What you believe, Rob, is stupid. What I believe is right. Okay, what do you believe? Do you live on McDonald's? Show me the curve. Where's the beef? Show me the curve. Yeah. Okay, Rob, so what? Why is this stuff important? Well, I hear that question a lot. So I came up with about 5 reasons off the top of my head why I think this could be important. Genesis is the foundation of all that we believe in the Bible to be true. If Genesis is wrong, then it all crumbles under a faulty foundation. Genesis says nothing, zip, zero, nada, about the earth being set in motion, orbital or rotational, around the sun. In fact, the sun doesn't even show up until after the earth is already in place with life already in existence. Genesis says the sun, moon, and stars were placed inside the same firmament within which that earth was formed, not outside of it. Thus, we have a completely enclosed system within which the sun, moon, and stars move, not the earth. Number 2, if what we are seeing concerning the flat enclosed earth thesis is true, then we are all there is. We are center stage. We are the main attraction, and there can be no argument as to whether or not there is a creator. None. His existence could not possibly become more blatantly obvious than in this model. 3, if the flat enclosed earth thesis is true, evolution goes out the window, and the theory of ancient alien seeders is obliterated. In this regard, I believe we become painfully aware of the great deception and will not be fooled by it. 4, if the flat enclosed earth thesis is true, then we cannot ever trust NASA or the government about anything, and we will finally be forced to fully trust Yahuwah's word as our sole source of truth and stop trying to bend and manipulate it to fit false paradigms. 5, if heliocentricity is false, then Scripture is true. If Scripture is true and can thus be taken literally, why should we not take it just as literal when it describes the earth as fixed, not moving, set on pillars, a foundation of pillars, carved as a circle, with edge borders inside something with 4 corners inside, enclosed under a dome?
I'm really curious as to what exactly is so crazy about the notion the earth could possibly be flat. Just saying, all things considered, that's actually quite funny.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the second day. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the third day. And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. And God said, "Let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven."
how it will change your life, first of all, when you understand it, is dramatic, to say the least. Will it change you from having to go to your job every day and the things that you typically do every day? No. But when this knowledge becomes more mainstream and these agencies are starting to be held accountable, and you understand that they're all participating in this, not just the United States government, not just NASA, but China, Russia, India, all of them have space programs. They all have the same symbolism. They're all doing the exact same thing to their citizenry. And the first thing you have to understand about this is that the deception goes all the way to the top. And when I say all the way to the top, you have to kind of get rid of the notion that the people at the very highest levels are working together. The people that control the world we're not against each other. There was never any such thing really as the Cold War. We're really not enemies with anybody else. This is all a facade that's being brought on for our benefit. But the people that are in power, that have all the money, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, the on and on and on, these are the people that literally run the central banking system, which of course has permeated the entire world. And any country that tries to get away from it, their leaders are quickly assassinated. It goes on and on and on. So you have to understand conspiracies a little bit to understand the magnitude of this deception. So why would they do this? Why are they trying to hide the fact that we are on an infinite plane or on a flat earth rather than a ball? Well, the answer to that, there's a lot of answers to that, but in my personal opinion, if you isolate people into the idea that they're on a blue marble that's in the middle of a universe that is really insignificant, and there's thousands or millions and billions of other worlds and possibly other civilizations, that makes most people think that we are insignificant and that we did actually come about as some sort of an accident. Now, when people believe that, their minds are much more malleable into being given the idea that there is no God, there is no creator, that all of this is just some sort of random happenstance. And because of that, that also gives the controllers this fertile soil to build other deceptions on. And it's all about control. Remember, it's not about money. Money is irrelevant. They print the money. Money is just something that you and I agree has value, but it really is just pieces of paper, right? These people are printing the money. They can print money all day long if they want to, and they do. So it's not about that. And it's not just about power either. It's about total control, mental, physical, spiritual, every way, shape, and form possible. And to wrap your head around this type of deception, whether you're religious or not, if you're religious, then you understand that this is Satan's plan all along. If you're not religious, then you need to understand that people are power hungry and they will do anything to gain and maintain this type of control. So I've kind of ranted on this a lot. So John and Jaron, if you would add into this for my relative and kind of elaborate on what I've said.
I would just add that a lot of people don't realize it, but really the fundamental cornerstone of nihilism, and really nihilism is sort of the most profound version of atheism. Really, atheism is probably the most popular quote-unquote religion, at least in America and probably worldwide. There's more atheists at heart because of one simple fact, and that is this whole Copernican principle, or this Big Bang Theory universe where the entire planet and even the galaxy are like a mere speck of dust and completely insignificant in the grand scheme of things. So from that perspective, if the Earth itself is just nothing special in the grand scheme of things, then how could anything that we do in our lives be of remote consequence whatsoever? And so this whole mindset, again, is sort of the founding cornerstone of atheism and ultimately nihilism. However, when people realize that the Big Bang is a load of theoretical bollocks, then it really changes this entire foundation of the world's perspective of this ultimately nihilist viewpoint. And so even if you don't consider yourself religious, that's probably because you've been affected by this culture that is ultimately nihilist.
Yep, well said. And I think so obvious when you look at, and Bob, you put it perfectly, that just what the money system has done to this country and to the world, really. In the book, Why Bankrupt America, it said that the Federal Reserve pays the Bureau of Engraving and Printing approximately $23 for each 1,000 notes printed. So 10,000 $100 notes, which is $1 million, cost the Federal Reserve $230. So they then secure a pledge of collateral equal to the face value of the US government. And that collateral is our land, labor, assets. And then it's collected by their agents, who are the IRS, not our agents. And by authorizing the Fed to regulate and create money, and thus inflation, basically Congress gave private banks power to create profits at will. That's what they do. It's all about making profits for themselves. And you have to remember how big of a conspiracy this is. This isn't talking about just the JFK thing, or isn't talking about just 9/11. It's on an umbrella kind of system to where it is the biggest deception that there is. It actually exposes every other deception, and nothing else brings down the power of the elite, because it really exposes education, science, the economy, television, museums, universities. Think of all the things that have been fooled. I feel worse for the people that are out there building satellites, the people that are out there actually working for these space agencies, the people out there teaching in schools as professors, because they would all come to the conclusion eventually, once this gets out, that they've all been contributing to the lie. And that's got to be the worst feeling that there is. And that's why you have a hard time with a Neil deGrasse or a Bill Nye, these guys ever even considering that the earth might not be what they were taught, because they understand if it's not, then their entire lives have been about promoting the lie. They are tool pieces for the elite, for the lie system, and it really destroys everything. And I'm a perfect example, John, of what you were talking about. When I realized religion had some things in it that didn't quite fit with my reality, and I was done with it, I realized it was many lies there. I popped out of that, and the one place that's there with open arms, calling for you, saying, we tell nothing but the truth, we're all about facts and evidence, is science. And I went there with my arms open, ready to embrace them, and said, oh, thank you, I'm so glad you're here, because over there I was just getting lied to left and right. And now I know science is the place to go. Now, thank goodness I'm into research and things that I wanted to know everything about it. I wasn't comfortable in just saying, well, now I realize religion's a lie, I'm just going to be scientific and promote science and just say the word science when anybody talks to me. It would have been really easy. I could have paraded myself around and been really Mr. Smart Guy and been able to debate Christians, and would have been really easy for me. But instead, I decided to look into it. I wanted to know, why is evolution real? Where is the evidence? Why are these things facts? How do they know the age of the earth? And the more and more I looked into it, and the more I asked these so-called science backers, the more I realized it was another religion. And that's ultimately, and I'll admit it, an atheist for probably 6 months. And thank goodness I looked into that science. But I notice out there all these other guys who are just making these debunk videos or calling us crazy. The difference between me and them is that they don't want to research it, or they don't know how to research past the deception layer. I mean, you have to understand, this is the biggest deception ever. It can never be let out. So if you're looking for, well, why does Jaron say this? And you go look up Google or something like that, and you just search it one time and don't try and look at any other sources besides the mainstream sources, then you shouldn't be surprised that you're going to get the exact answer you're looking for. That's only going to confirm what the elitists, or what these people who are fooling us from the top down, what they want you to find. And then they go and make videos claiming these are evidence that we're wrong. And they say, well, these guys didn't even research it. If they would have looked it up one time, they would have found it. That's crazy talk. If you think we don't know the mainstream reasoning behind it, that we don't need to bring that up to people, because anybody like you can go look it up and find that exact answer. That's not doing research. And this is a deception on the highest level that you need to go and dig deeper and look at different bits and pieces and put it together and come up with your own explanation. Because if you're just going to take what mainstream tells you and believe it, then go watch Fox News and enjoy what the mainstream wants you to enjoy. That's the way that they operate. So I just think when it comes down to people asking, how does it affect my life? No, I guess it depends on you. If you don't care that you've been lied to about everything from school, from kindergarten on, everything that you were taught in school was meant to get your mind into a certain frame of reference, to make you think about the world a certain way, to make you think about your parents, and to make you think about your friends, and to make you think about your government, all in a prescribed way to make the rich get richer and make you into a wage slave. If you don't care that that happened, if you're happy going to your 9-to-5 job and you're comfortable in your belief about who your creator is, then it doesn't affect your life. For a lot of us, that is a pretty big deal. For me, it looks like 35 years of my life was completely wasted on a false existence that someone else decided to sell me. You know, I'm going to spend the rest of my life exposing it.